Good morning, everyone. We're paid to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and to God what belongs to God. We can hardly comment on this gospel without some understanding of the civil strife in Israel at the time of Jesus, where civil and religious values often clashed head-on. Rome, a foreign power, a pagan power, occupied the country. The law of Moses forbade the Jew to support either foreigners or pagans. The people were forced to support an occupying Roman power with their tax money, and that created a real conflict of conscience for them. For to do so meant obedience and allegiance to Caesar in Rome. But this current controversial question that the Pharisees posed to Jesus provided excellent ammunition to fire at him and test him. This verbal encounter we see in the gospel today was really not generated by a sincere quest for the truth, totally motivated by the desire of the Pharisees and Herodians to trap him in a dilemma. So how do we give to God what belongs to God, is the question really for us. A more basic question still, what belongs to God? The only reasonable answer to that question is we do. We belong to God. Regardless of our race, our class, our skill set, our portfolio, we're God's. We are held in God's hands, embraced in the heart of God. So the care of his vulnerable ones, the lifting up of his fallen ones, the mending of his broken ones, the acceptance of his marginalized ones, is giving what belongs to God. The struggle comes, and we know it so well, when we fail to realize that all belongs to God. And when we fail to realize that and don't care for the vulnerable ones, the poor, the elderly, the mentally challenged, the outcasts, when we don't lift up the fallen ones, those with addictions, those with low self-esteem, those who believe they're no good, those who have never been affirmed, those who are abused, when we fail to mend the broken ones, those whose spirits have been lost and lost hope, or any positive sense for the future been taken away from them. It's awful when we try to kill someone's spirit. They're broken. And when we don't accept the marginalized ones, those victims of racism or prejudice because of color of skin or ethnic background, or those speak another language than ours, these days, we are seeing protests in the streets, most of them peaceful, really, some violence in our streets, because for so long in our country, in our society, many African American people remain marginalized and broken and vulnerable still after really 400 years of oppression in our land, despite civil rights laws enacted, hope-filled rhetoric promised, equality spoken. Change has been slow to make a difference, and racism and institutional racism and double standards still lurk with every failure of the justice system, or police heavy-handedness, or black men stopped in traffic and followed around a department store simply because they're black. And why none of us condone violence and rioting in the streets. It is, as Dr. Martin Luther King said in 1967, when our nation experienced rioting in the streets then, he said, rioting and violence is the language of the unheard. May all of us not just pay attention to the pictures of the protests in the news and in the newspapers, and the sometimes violent reaction of years of frustration, but listen to the cries of those who felt unheard for so long. Listen. Listen, all of us. Listen and seek to understand. And when we get it as a society, do what we can to change whatever we can to care for those who are vulnerable, to lift up those fallen ones, to mend those broken ones, and accept the marginalized ones. So give what belongs to God, and what belongs to God, we do. We all do. Rich and poor, black and white, yellow and red, PhDs and skilled laborers, men and women and children, Protestant, Catholic, Jew, Muslim, and on and on. Listen, seek to understand, and when we get it, do what we can to change whatever needs to change in us. Amen, St. Peter?